Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today on this webinar, whatever we want to call it. This is a television show for us, Chris, today because it's more about just telling stories, I think, than anything. But so excited to have Chris Sorenson with me from Phoneburner, somebody I've known for quite a while. Been in the trenches with, been on the much happier side of being in the trenches with. And just really so happy to have you here today, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me, Michelle. You're one of my favorite people on the planet, and it's neat to be able to spend an hour with you and all of our close friends.
Which is a great reminder for me to say that we are recording this. And so now I have that, Chris, just so you know, for forever that I can just bring back. And the recording will be available next week. We might talk about some legal topics. We are not giving legal advice. But if you would like legal advice, please feel free to reach out and speak with me. I'm always happy to do that. And so, Chris, I'm not really sure where to start, except that I have these little gems here, which you've
Right.
probably seen this book before. John Rydell, who is well, there you go. Yeah, he is one of the owners of Phoneburner, and I think it was the CEO before you, right? Wasn't,
He
didn't
was.
you
That's
technically
right.
replace him?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So he's got basically, it's just a book of isms that I think John must have, his words of wisdom that he got out there and got published. And so the first one, which I think is really appropriate for what we are doing right now, because we're going to be talking about some crazy FCC stuff that happened a few years ago with Phoneburner. But he says, be skeptical of news and what you read online, whether you are on the right or the left. When you read news articles about things you know firsthand, you realize how many mistakes there are, which I think we'll be probably talking a little bit about that today. So he says, apply the filter to all articles and be careful trusting what you read unless you know the source. But this is the one that should probably worry you because it says, don't let tech people have control.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm a tech person. I have a computer science degree. Tech people can rule the company and can tell you what is possible and what isn't. Don't let them.
Yeah.
They get to collaborate on decisions, not control them. I have a feeling you're controlling a few decisions, so we may need him to reissue with a correction on that one.
But put an asterisk by it at least at a minimum.
And, except for Chris Sorensen, you've become an asterisk now.
Yeah. No.
Anyway, and speaking of fascinating, there was something else I wanted to share before we really get into things. And that's your resume, Chris, because it is very interesting. If you look at all the jobs you've held, which I think just says you probably can't hold a job, Chris. We'll have to find more about that. But it's everything from a basketball coach to a freelance writer to a farmer, and then various positions that were tech, ending in you being the CEO of Phoneburner. So, as I looked at your resume, I found this just absolutely fascinating. So, I'd love to hear the journey about how you started on a farm in Washington and ended up at Phoneburner.
So my great grandfather migrated to the US in 1906, kissed the ground at Ellis Island, came over from
Mm.
Denmark, and he was part of this crew that thought there could be riches found in Alaska. So he came
Mm.
to Seattle and got on a boat, went up to Alaska with nothing but a lot of work ethic behind him and thought he'd maybe find gold. But on his journey across the country before he went up to Alaska, he met a woman in Indianapolis who said, "Hey, I got this unique skill. I know how to grow Concord grapes. And
Mm.
if this whole gold thing doesn't turn out for you, there might be an opportunity to do some vineyards and see what that holds." So he went
Mm.
up like
In
so many other
Indiana,
brave
though,
people
huh? I don't
in
think of
Indiana.
Indiana as being a big vineyard place.
It's close enough to Michigan. There's a lot of grapes in Michigan,
Yeah.
and so this was something that her family had tapped into. And so my great grandfather goes up to Alaska. Things
Mm.
don't quite work out like they didn't for many people who went up and tried to prospect and hit it big. So he comes back and he ended up marrying this gal, and they settled down in Eastern Washington, about 200 miles from where I'm at. And in 1916 or so, started a family farm there that now has gone through four generations. My brothers and my mom and dad are working those 700 acres, and A lot
Oh,
of our
cool.
grapes go to Welch's grape juice, if you've ever had that, and the Welch's fruit snacks and all those types of things. So yeah, so my background started off, growing up on this vineyard and learning hard work and what it meant to get up early, go to bed late, be at the mercy of the seasons.
Mhm.
And just a lot of life lessons that I think were so valuable to take forward in a career, and having the good fortune of being able to grow up on a farm. And as you kind of bring up that resume, I think one of the things that I've been so lucky to do, and you can only do it in a country like ours, is to really explore your interests, right? There's some range there from sitting on top of John Deere tractor, to coaching basketball, to working for an NBA team, to spending time at a big prestigious university, to, now being with a bunch of my dear friends here at Phoneburner and leading the charge and all those rich experiences along the way. So I'm very grateful for a lot of people that have helped me along in this journey.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I think that that's something that a lot of us are thankful for and lucky actually to have had. I don't know if I told you this, but I'm actually from a farming family also, and but it was in Kentucky, and it was mostly
Oh,
tobacco farms on my mom's side of the family.
yeah.
They still own some farmland down there, but tobacco is not the crop that it used to be
No.
in Kentucky. But it's interesting, when I think back on my farm days, the lessons I learned are very different probably than the lessons you learned. Because I also had an uncle down there who had a dairy farm. And so
Yeah.
lots of cows and lots of electric fences everywhere. And one of the things I would do when I would go stay with them is make sure that they had enough water. And what I learned very quickly is you don't hold on to the metal end of a hose and shoot through an electrical fence.
No. That no, no.
So, but
Not
that is
unless you want some excitement.
you do it once, right? Yes, you absolutely only do it once, but it does teach you to really kind of stay away from those things that are going to lead to those kind of shocks. So,
That's right.
in so many
Absolutely.
different ways. Yeah, yeah. But so from there, I think one of the areas that I also thought was just so applicable to the things that we're talking about today was your days at Haya and the types of things that you did there. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I had a really wonderful experience at Haya. And for those of you that are not familiar with Haya, Haya is the analytics engine for AT&T, for Samsung Electronics, providing basically protection for the consumer against, really deeply unwanted calls, or in, extreme cases, those fraudulent calls where malicious actors are trying to take advantage of innocent people. I had a great group of people that I work with there. The company's led by a guy that I have a deep amount of respect for, Alex Algard, who's a serial entrepreneur. Um, at High, I learned a ton. I learned a ton about how this phone network that we all participate in works, where some of the risks and the dangers are, and really where there's a lot of good opportunities for legitimate businesses to get through and connect with consumers. And so, wonderful stretch of time there. And it's a great company.
Yeah, yeah. It is definitely the center of a lot of conversations that folks in our industry are having. On the compliance side of things, that's something that at least we can have a little bit of control over. We can put, processes in place. We can put policies in place. We can review contracts. We can do those types of things and put companies in pretty good stead on the compliance side. But when it comes to some of the things that the analytics companies are doing, blocking and labeling types of things that they're doing for carriers, it's really much more of a gray area. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that and what you've learned really from both sides, from
Yeah.
being on the analytics engine side of things, and then also being on the, outbound call initiator, the voice service provider side. And it's really a fascinating topic. So should we hop into the FCC stuff? You ready to talk about that?
Yeah, I was just looking around. I don't have any Kleenex on me, but I'm sure I can find it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
equipped.
there
Yeah,
you go.
no,
Yeah.
let's do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just to give a little bit of context here. And so I think a lot of people probably heard about Phoneburner for the first time back in 2023. And it was because Phoneburner was the first company that the Federal Communications Commission issued a notice about that deemed them basically an unreliable carrier and encouraged companies to to block all of their calls is the appropriate mitigation strategy for preventing those calls to get through. And so that was the end of January 2023, and I remember it really well because we had never met before. You referred to me by a colleague who knew that we had experience with the FCC, but I was in Palm Springs on a vacation, probably the first vacation I'd taken in 3 years with my husband on a couple's vacation. It was 2 days before my birthday, and Phoneburner goes. And all of the plans I had for that vacation were drastically changed because when you get a notice like that, that's not something you can say, oh, you know what, we'll put that off until next week. It's something that we needed to get on top of right away. And so I'd love to hear from your side. I know folks would. So you receive, this notice from the FCC, and Twilio is also sending notices to Phoneburner, and customers are calling, and everybody's just trying to figure out what's going on. Give us a little bit of insight on what was happening on kind of the back end of that at Phoneburner, because you had probably been CEO for literally, you had just started in January of 2023.
Yeah, it was my initiation gift.
Yeah.
So it was a Tuesday afternoon, and we had gotten a kind of a cryptic email actually earlier in the day that had said, "Hey, we're suspending service for you." And it was, as a platform like ours, we have to have a diversity of carriers that we work with, right, in case anybody's down or whatever, redundancy. So we get this cryptic email, and it was from a carrier that we had maybe sent 0.5% of traffic through. So we didn't really think much of it. And then one of the members of our support team reaches out to a Slack channel that we have and said, "Hey, I've got a reporter that's looking to talk to Chris about the FCC notice." And I thought, what FCC notice? And I was actually en route. I live in Seattle, and I was on my way to go interview somebody for an open position that we had that had been referred to me. So I'm on my way in there, and our attorney, our general counsel, calls me and says, "Hey, I got to talk to you." And I said, "Can it wait?" And she said, "No." So I pull off the freeway, and I think my jaw is still there in terms of what transpired after that. She
That's a
read the
great
FCC.
metaphor right there, Chris. I pulled off the freeway.
Yeah,
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 right.
and
Yeah.
awful, awful. So she said, "Hey, I don't know how bad this is, but it looks bad on the surface. We've been named alongside one of our customers in this notice, and the basic gist of it is that they being the FCC, have said that literally no traffic is to be generated on behalf of either one of these entities." And at that point, it didn't hit me the weight of what had actually happened. So uh, I call the chairman, the one of the founders of the business. I said, "Hey, I think I got a little bit of an issue here that we're going to have to deal with. I don't know quite yet what the ramifications are of that." But then the weight of it, by 4 o'clock of that afternoon, it started to feel like cinder block after cinder block after cinder block was coming on my back. Within 24 hours, for a platform that powers tens of thousands of people to make calls, to not have a dial tone is the equivalent of Amazon not having a web connection, right? Like for in our little world, we were dead in the water. We could literally not dial out because all of the carriers that we had worked with interpreted the letter from the FCC in such a way that said you're not carrying any of their traffic, even though if you would have more carefully read it, you could see that the traffic to not be carried was actually more isolated to one of our customers who they had had an issue with.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and
so,
if you'd like, I can even read that language because we
yeah,
spent a
go ahead.
lot of time on this language in
Yeah,
discussions
go
with the
for it.
FCC, with customers, with
Yeah,
carriers, and eventually they did see it our way, but it had
yeah,
basically laid out what had happened with a company called MV Realty, which, from Phoneburner's perspective, they were a real estate company, right? They weren't anything that was unusual. This wasn't a customer that you would have suspected had any issues. Subsequently, there were a number of AG actions that were initiated that pointed to things that had nothing to do really with the phone calls, but with the products that they were selling. And so when the FCC issued this notice, it was the first notice like this that had ever been issued, and it was a result of the Trace Act being passed, and also the FCC putting out several reports and orders that mandated that voice service providers have effective robocall mitigation strategies in place, and that they KYC, know their customers before they onboard them. And it put into place something called the robocall mitigation database. And in order for a carrier to carry traffic from a voice service provider or other downstream carriers, they're required to check to make sure that those companies have a robocall mitigation plan filed in that database. And so one of the things that they can do is they can take the filing out of the robocall mitigation database, which basically puts you out of business immediately. The FCC did not do that. What they did do is they issued a notice to Phoneburner and to one of its carriers, and also issued a press release. The press release did not do a great job of summarizing what the order said. I think a lot of folks focused on that press release, but basically what it said is that MV Realty is placing telephone calls that Phoneburner is carrying, and that the issues or that the phone calls are scams to people that are on the do not call list without consent, so illegal robocalls. And then they said to other carriers, by allowing its customers to match outbound calling numbers in this is the other thing I skipped here, and also that you were using local caller IDs, which is a standard in the industry. So pointing to things that are very typical for voice service providers to do, but couching those in a way that made it seem like something nefarious was going on. And so they said, we consider blocking the traffic, meaning what traffic, but blocking the traffic, which we obviously interpreted as MV Realty's traffic. Unfortunately, not everybody interpreted it that way, but the FCC considers blocking the traffic to be an example of effective mitigation. And we spent a lot of time on that sentence in conversations with the FCC as well, who they do not retract things once they go out. We just let them know basically that we would be making very public statements about what that meant. And if those statements are wrong, you need to let us know right now. Otherwise, this is what we're going to start talking about. And that is what we started talking about. But yeah, with that one sentence, we consider blocking the traffic to be an example of effective mitigation. It led to a bunch of problems.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we had no dial tone. So you have tens of thousands of people that their livelihood they placed in our hands to provide a service to allow them to do their work. And they effectively, for a period of time, were incapable of doing their work. Which, I mean, to put into perspective, the amount of damage that does to your business is hard to quantify and state. And yeah, it was a very, very, very difficult period. It was the corporate equivalent of having a heart attack, effectively. I mean, you're flatlined. You can't do anything, and you've got, understandably thousands of excuse me, customers that are really upset. But then you've also got a team of people that have called our company home for years that are terrified and doing everything that they possibly can to try to help right the situation. And I think one of the big things that I learned in this kind of crisis that we were in at the time is, my gosh, in life in general, who you surround yourself with is, if it's not the most important thing, it is pretty darn close. And we obviously are forever indebted and grateful for the help that you gave us. But there was a lot of courage displayed here by our team and the individuals at the company. And there were some people that took risks on us too as a result of that. Because literally, I mean, just to put it in perspective for everybody, every carrier, and at the time we were working with 4 or 5 different carriers that would carry the traffic for our customers, every single one of them turned their back on us. And this is after years of relationships, years of working together, years of never even being 5 minutes late on an invoice. I mean, like a perfect customer. And they all turned their back on us, every single one of them. And we knew, 48 hours in on this whole thing, if we didn't have at least a dial tone on the third day that we probably were facing extinction as a business. Like, we're going to have to shut this thing down. And a, a guy in Santa Monica took a chance on us and said, despite my own legal counsel telling me not to work with you, I trust you. And he gave us enough oxygen to be able to survive. And the guy's name's Cameron Weeks, and his partner Bracken. And I mean, I'm just forever just so much in their debt for what they did to at least give us that lifeline to come back.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, for a company that has software that sits on top of carrier infrastructure, when you rip out all that carrier infrastructure, you rip out all those mechanisms to place and receive phone calls or send and receive text messages. It's not just going from one outlet and plug it into another, right? Everyone's got different rules, underlying infrastructure and systems. And we went months on end with just challenges associated with wholesale changes to our platform. And we lost a lot of customers because they couldn't hang and wait with us to get these problems solved. Now we've subsequently bounced back some, but those first couple of months, I used to have a full head of hair. I mean, I was like Wayne Newton hair, like I had a ton of it, and this thing caused me to lose a significant amount of it, not only myself but others that I'm involved with, just because, like I said, Michelle, it was a heart attack. I mean, to
It
get
was.
that, to be able to emotionally process it, but then at the same time, the responsibilities that you have to your employees, to your customers, it was a lot for us to bear. But it speaks, I think, to the resiliency of a group of people who are bound by a shared vision, and to be able to survive something like that and come out the other end. There's not usually a week or a month that goes by where I don't encounter someone new, where their only exposure to us or
Mm,
understanding of us is this event that happened back in January of 23.
yeah.
And they're amazed that this team that I'm fortunately enough to be a part of was able to survive that, because it was literally curtains if we didn't have a couple of breaks go our way.
Yeah. And on top of that, on top of trying to just get the business up and running, you now are in the middle of having to answer very significant questions to the FCC. But we didn't have to prove that we were not guilty of something. We actually had to prove that we were innocent.
Yeah,
And it, thank God you have an amazing in-house counsel whose name is also Michele. So I think there's maybe a common theme there, Chris, for Michelle's. Is it your wife's name, Michele, too? Okay. I don't know. There's something to trifecta there for you, but
yeah, that's right.
anyway, yeah. And so you're answering, very quickly. You were given 14 days in the order that or the notice that the FCC put out to respond as to why you shouldn't be permanently banned from basically carrying traffic on the network. And so we successfully did that within that 14 days. And then on top of that, the attorneys general are now very interested in what's going on with that client. And so they're
Yeah,
issuing subpoenas to you. So now you've turned into a subpoena response mechanism, which is a very costly thing to have to do, not just from the legal standpoint, but from the manpower that it took within Phoneburner to begin
yeah,
to continue to be able to cooperate. And I think the ability to do that type of thing really made a huge difference in all of this. That you were able to respond in a way that worked for everybody. And at the end of all of this, we still have a few more things to talk about, but just skipping to the ending, Phoneburner came out without any type of action. I would like to say without any type of scar, but the press release is just hard to recover from. But without any action ever being taken, and that was really a testament to the company.
yeah. I think it speaks to the partnership with you. Certainly, Michelle on our team as well, our general
Mhm.
counsel, deserves a tremendous amount of credit. But I,
Yeah.
I also think of people like our head of trust and safety, Carly, who you well know, right? We had we had the good fortune of having good people, good systems, and level-headed thinking all working together at the same time to try to generate and produce a good outcome.
Yeah.
Um, And I think for anybody that, I mean, I wish this on no one to ever have to go through something like that. But it really, I think it speaks to something I mentioned earlier. It is unbelievably important to surround yourself with really good people. You just have to. And I can think of others that I know that have had similar type of experiences, maybe not so much from the regulatory standpoint, but they've had something come up, a breach or a cyber attack or things like that. You really see people's colors when they're put under pressure. And my goodness, I think it stands to reason. Really take your time in hiring good people and building a culture where people are pulling for each other and they care more about the name that's on the front of the jersey than the one that's on the back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's that whole value-driven business organization, and I know Phoneburner is very into that. Our law firm is as well. We lead the law firm by core values, and I think it's got to be a
That's right.
central part to any business, or you don't survive something like this. I should say that we do have questions and answers. So if you have any questions for Chris, he has graciously volunteered to respond to those. So don't hesitate to put those in the question and answer box. All right, so I bet you get this question a lot because
Yeah.
it was something that I had to talk about when this all first started, and that's the name Phoneburner. I have frequently wondered if it was a different name, and I love it that you haven't changed it, that you guys have stood behind that. I think most companies would have tried to have run from it after all of this, and you haven't, and you've just kind of persevered through it. But how many times has somebody said something to you about the name?
I don't know if I could even count that high. There's
Yeah,
been a lot of comments, so to speak, about our name. And, they asked us if they could buy our service at 7-Eleven, right? Because they think of the
right.
burner phones and all those other things. Um, I think it speaks to a resilient business that was built over the last 2 decades. But names at times change too. I mean, who knows what the future can hold? But yeah, we've gotten our fair share of elbows to the side about our name over the years, and certainly I kind of have to wonder if our name was something different, if we maybe would have been treated a little differently. Who knows, right? Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. The other thing that I really appreciated about the way that you and Michelle and John approached this whole thing is, we got our nose to the grindstone. We started working immediately on getting this taken care of. Failure was definitely not an option. That was something that everybody agreed to. But we had a lot of meetings with other firms that were PR firms or law firms or DC firms, and recommending that we go to Congress and go to the AGs and pound our fists about how unfair this is. And really, to Phoneburner's credit, that's not the approach they took, and they stuck with our plan to show the FCC that we had done things right, not that the FCC needed to be dismantled as an agency. And that was something that I really that's when I really developed a really huge respect for how Phoneburner was going to approach this whole thing. We were gonna work the system the way that it was set up, and we were going to show that things have been done the way that they should have been. And yes, hindsight is 2020 when you're hearing about these other things that you would never know from a phone call, right? These are not
Yeah,
things you would have known from having set up phone service. This really had to do with what their contracts look like. And
that's right.
we're going to get to this a little bit, talking about KYC and robocall mitigation and those types of things, and kind of lessons learned from this about the expectations of regulators, which are never reasonable, I can tell you. And that's
Yeah.
something you always have to know when you're setting up your compliance programs. But it really does speak volumes to Phoneburner's approach to this whole thing. I guess, and I didn't set you up for this question, so if you even need to think about it after I ask him, I mean, if you had just one takeaway from, other than it's the people, just about the process and how things were done, both before and after, like any big aha moment that you've carried with you to just make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Which, and we're going to talk about all of the things that Phoneburner has done, but was there ever anything like that?
I think there's one word that comes to mind, which is empathy. And what I mean by that is, I think what was particularly helpful for us in that period, you're scared shitless, right? Excuse my language. You can bleep that out, but you really are. You're scared to death that you're not going to be there to survive to the next day. But empathy is a real powerful thing. When you are able to see the world to the extent that you can from the other party's perspective, right? And there were plenty of people that we had strong feelings towards, whether it was our current carriers that completely abandoned us or others in this story. When you have the power of empathy on your side and you're able to see it from their end, it's really helpful in charting a path and navigating forward. Um, One of my favorite authors is a guy by the name of Scott Adams. He created the Dilbert cartoon, and in one of his books, he mentions something that says, um, being absolutely right and being absolutely wrong feel exactly the same, right? They feel exactly the same because if you're wrong but you think you're right, it feels the same as if it's vice versa. And so having empathy and understanding why certain things were happening, I think helped us then be able to increase the amount of options that we had available to us to navigate. But when you get myopic and you don't exercise empathy, and man, it's plenty hard to do in a situation like that. You
Mm.
really shut down avenues to thinking or pathways that could otherwise help you navigate some very choppy water.
Yeah.
Um, and so, if there was one thing I think to really highlight, it was that I felt like we were plenty frustrated. Don't get me wrong, but I was empathetic to the FCC's position here, right? They were trying to protect innocent people from, in their perspective, being misled or deceitful practices happening. And I think being able to see that, understand the motivation behind it, you don't come leading, with a sword drawn out. You come out maybe with a different approach
Yeah.
uh, because you're empathetic. And so,
Yeah.
I don't wish this on anybody. But if you ever find yourself in one of those situations, I think if you strive first to empathy, you'll be amazed by how many paths and options expose themselves for you.
Yeah. And when you think about it that way, all the FCC really wanted to do, they didn't want to shut Phoneburner down. They didn't want to shut down the carriers. They wanted to stop phone calls from going to consumers that they thought were illegal scam calls that were causing, potentially these consumers to lose their home because basically liens were being put on houses in exchange for loans and basically real estate contracts to sell their house. And so it was a situation that became very problematic for the state attorney generals that were getting these complaints from consumers. And again, not something that Phoneburner was ever aware of. It was a real estate company, right? It was a real estate company at the end of the day. But as a result of that, and this is probably a good time to kind of switch to that. A lot of changes were made, but they were being made anyway at that time because you got to think back to 2023. This is just when robocall mitigation is starting. We're just getting the FCC's report and orders that are coming out about how to do that. Not a lot of great guidance, but basically telling you what the end result needs to be, not exactly how you can get there. And carriers that are now a little bit terrified about, if we are not being really tough on our voice service providers, then we risk a lot of really horrible things happening, including being identified as an unreliable carrier and their traffic not being carried, which has subsequently happened to a number of companies that,
I think there was 150 plus carriers today that were named that were said, let's get them off.
yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. So anyway, so Phoneburner's approach was okay. Let's robocall mitigation. We are going to be the masters of it, and we're going to definitely know all of our customers, and to really an extreme at some points, just to make sure that nothing like this could ever happen again. And I know your in-house counsel and your compliance officer, again, both who are wonderful, did a really great job, I thought, of being on top of that at the same time they were managing all of these other types of things that happened, because that was the one thing we really needed to show at the end of this, that all
Yeah.
of those things were in place and that they were effective, and that we would make sure that if there was a canary in the coal mine, we were going to catch it before anybody else did. And so I don't know, is there
100%.
anything you want to talk about with any of that? And I think armor is probably something we can start talking about, and then maybe some of the other issues we're seeing with analytics engines.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to make that would be interesting. One is nothing beats a good system, right? And the system is designed to generate the results that it was architected for. And so um, the significant investments that we've subsequently had to make from a trust and safety standpoint have generated the results that we've wanted, which is a safer company and subsequently a safer phone network, right? There's a lot of things that we ask of people before we will allow access to a very powerful platform and then to the broader phone network. And so having really good systems run by really great people, and then making sure that you update and you modify those as the dynamics of the business and the environment change. And so I think that we've really done a good job on that. And a lot of that is in partnership with you. And so if you're listening to this and you have any kind of obligation within your business to have a better understanding of who's using your service, I would highly advise you to get ahead of things. Look at it as, paying a dime now instead of a dollar later, and talk with Michele and her team about how you can really set up that good system for understanding access points into the network. It's just I can't say enough about it. The second part, when you're talking about call blocking, robocall, deliverability, and all those other things, um, there are a couple of benefits to getting injured. And one of those benefits to getting injured is that as you come back, you have to compensate with muscle development in other areas. And so as we got through this whole process and now going on, close to 30 months removed from that, not only have we had to develop a strong muscle from a trust and safety standpoint, but when you have the entirety of your carrier infrastructure that you've leaned into, relied on for years, ripped out from under you, and then subsequently replaced, you develop new muscles as it relates to really understanding the depth, the complexity, and the nuances of how the phone network works. And so over these last 2.5 years, and then combined with experience that many of us brought into the business from, being at our previous employers or, previous spots in the world of telephony, we have been able to develop some pretty unique strengths, develop that muscle, so to speak, on how to ensure that more calls get delivered, that fewer calls get marked as spam. A lot of it's privilege to the background that myself and members of the team bring into it. But a lot of that is also the result of being hurt as bad as we did, having to rebuild things from the ground up. Michele, I think about the investments that were never on our radar, but
Mm-hmm.
after going through this are on our radar. We've deployed at the network level the same level of kind of telephony, insight, view, network operation solutions that literally Vodafone and Telenor and Verizon deploy. Why? Because we had to, because
That too.
switching in all these systems. And so you start to, when you're layering on all these different things to provide a great experience, you learn things that you never knew that you had to know before because you just took it for granted. And that's created some unique capabilities for a provider like us to really help frustrated businesses in this whole kind of sea of what do I do to not only get spam off my calls, but to get calls answered. And a unique set of capabilities have emerged from going through the physical therapy, so to speak, of coming back from such a massive attack, event on our business.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, and I hear this a lot, and I hear, these discussions kind of from both sides. And, as a voice service provider who's looking at, what they can control and what they're required to control, and the folks that are providing them with notifications that are supposed to put them on notice of issues that may not necessarily be accurate notices. And so, there are the industry traceback requests that you get, and
Yep.
a lot of time, and not no disrespect to the ITG. We work with them. I've worked with them regularly, but they just receive notifications from folks that are able to provide information to the ITG that they believe there's something wrong with calls and
Yeah,
that they don't have consent, which not something that they can really know most of the time. But really, those just get lopped over to the voice service providers to now again prove that you're innocent. I feel like the voice service providers are put in this position so often that they have to prove that they're innocent with the information that their customers have. And that empathetic approach that you're talking about, I think it probably goes really far when answering those types of things. This is just not the ITG. Obviously, carriers are sending those types of requests. The voice service providers are the front line for responding to subpoenas from regulatory agencies or private litigants. And so it's just a really interesting and difficult position to be in. And so all of those things that you're talking about, having that system in place and making sure that everybody is on the same page and we've established how we're going to do it and this is how we're going to do it every time is
yeah,
about the only way that you can navigate through all of the literally dozens of landmines that are out there every day.
yeah, absolutely. And I think at the highest level, we all collectively need to have the most open and accessible network there is, right? We've got to make sure that the ability to have good two-way communication is open and it's accessible.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think where we found ourselves is that by having this open and accessible network, that we've reduced the effective cost of transacting on it down to next to zero. So if you look at the history of robocall, you look at the history of spam calls, you look at all that, like, there's always been a little bit of a joker here and there that was out there, even on landline days, that would call and try to pretend to be somebody else. But when you had now VoIP and all these other things make it, with a credit card and a $500 limit into an account and a call that costs sub-cent a minute to execute, well, what's that do? It creates a breeding ground for a bunch of bad actors to come in. And these technologies have been wonderful because they've created access points that are good for good outcomes in people's lives. And I think if you play it forward, what the system, and by system I mean the phone network right now, what it's really missing is a better sense of balance.
Hmm.
Because right now we are finding ourselves in a world where we are doing too much overcorrecting to try to get bad people out at the expense of good actors being hurt, right? And there's a lot of different parties that have a role in this, right? We talk frequently internally and with our customers and with our partners. I mean, there's 10 to 12 known countermeasures that exist between an enterprise making a phone call and that call landing to who they're trying to reach and connect to. And each one of those countermeasures takes a different approach, a different relationship, a different tactic to try to navigate it around to successfully deliver a call. But the system's missing balance because there's too many good calls that are not getting through that should be getting through.
Yeah.
And so I think that it encourages all of us to be more collaborative, to think more in depth about things that we can do to bring more balance into the system so that the good enterprise callers can have an easier time connecting. And I get, back to empathy, and I'll just take 30 seconds to share this. I get why the overcorrection's been there. Having spent the time that I did at Haya, and for people that are on this call that have spent any time with the analytic companies, when you sit there and you see the shit that people are trying to do to your neighbors, it's infuriating. I'll give you an example. In COVID, when that all went down, we at Haya at the time, we identified this scam that was going on where somebody had gotten this massive list of citizens in the Southeast and they were calling kind of like a next of kin because grandma and grandpa or your elderly parents could not go out to the grocery store to get food. And so give us a credit card. We'll make sure that, kind of like a delivery service, the groceries are going to be delivered. And people were in such a panic, didn't know what was going on. They're like, okay, yeah, here's a credit card, assuming that their elderly that they care for were going to be fed. Groceries never show up. They're out the money. And it created just terrible things, right? Like, so how do you go and stop those people and stop them quickly? But at the same time, you've got another vulnerable population who's not getting calls that they need to get. which is a problem. So last week, one of our customers is in Minneapolis, and this customer, they, if you, I don't know if can you see this right here? This is what I'm
Mhm.
holding up here. This is an incontinence product. In fact, it was one of the samples from their warehouse in Minneapolis last week. This incontinence product for people that have trouble controlling their bowels, this right here liberates people from their homes.
Mm.
And if they do not get that call to fulfill that order, they are prisoners in their own home. And my customer went through a series of time where their calls were getting blocked, despite best efforts to have them remediated. And this product cannot get to that person who wants nothing more than to go to their grandchild's birthday dinner. That's wrong. There's not enough balance in the system. And so you have to be in this cat and mouse game constantly to try and go out there and help them to liberate people from their home. And it's not just, elderly people that are susceptible. There's kids with autism that require these, that they can't go to the playground or live a normal life. And so I think if we can try to work together more collaboratively to get more balance into the system, we're all going to be better served. Because right now, like I mentioned, those 8 to 12 countermeasures that exist between a legitimate call reaching a recipient, there's a lot of economically motivated actors in the middle that are preying on this problem. And I know for myself and my team, we are trying to help our customers navigate this maze as efficiently as they can, so that, at the end of the day, I am passionate about that. People can be liberated from their homes. They can go about having a normal life, because there's a lot of good people that are striving to get good results on the phone network, and they can't get it right now because we've shifted far too much the other way to just try to stop anything that we think looks like spam.
Yeah, yeah. Amen. That was a good sermon. I didn't think we'd have incontinence products on our show here today. But no, I mean, what a great, the point is so well made. And I was reading some stuff that came out this week too, just even about banks being able to do fraud alerts, and that those are now currently being stopped unless they have specific language in their consent. And so it is really, the pendulum keeps swinging, right? And I think balance is the perfect thing to describe, where we need to go here. Is there anything else we should talk about? We have one question that came in beforehand that we can talk about. But I guess, for me, I'm really interested in, Chris, what do you see happening in the future? I mean, all of us are fighting to reach that balance, right? Making sure that the correct narratives, like the one you just had, are out there, so that those are the types of things that we're safeguarding, while we're also safeguarding from people who don't want calls. I mean, we don't want to deliver calls to people who don't want calls. That's just, it's a fact. Where do you think we're heading? I know you have you spend a lot of time working with the carriers and the analytics engines and your customers. What do you see happening out there?
I think that we are underprepared from a voice standpoint, many of us, for what the impact of AI is going to have on the phone call, as it relates to calls that are being generated, that, with really good intent there, pharmacy, prescription, all this type of stuff, all the way to the other end where you've got deep fake type things that are coming in, where it could be hard for a person to discern whether or not this is a legit real call, because it's a well-sounded AI deep fake behind it. So I think that there's some areas where we've got to accelerate a little bit more. There's some interesting work that's being done, but I don't know if that work is not at par with the advancement of the technology. It's kind of trailing, I think, behind it a little bit. So I think that there's some big things that are coming that way that we need to be prepared for. I think the one tangible thing to take away from all of this, particularly now, I mean, the world is unrecognizable from this AI standpoint from where we were 6 months ago, even, and the acceleration, the foot's on the gas even more. I think what will happen is that the people that remain most level-headed and most reasonable / empathetic are going to be the ones that survive it, and they're going to be the ones that thrive in this new kind of landscape that we find ourselves in. And so a lot of things are going to shift, but if you are able to be reasonable and I think empathetic and understanding that way, I think you can create good outcomes for your own companies and for the customers that you serve.
Again, amen, brother. But with AI, it's such an interesting area, and really a word of caution is folks are just charging headlong into the use of AI, and I think that a lot of them aren't fully considering all of the legal implications of using AI for phone calls, and it's not just the fact that if you're using an artificial voice, you have to treat it like a pre-recorded message on the
Yeah,
federal level. So this just, you might as well say this applies to all 50 states. So
yeah,
you need prior express written consent to make those types of calls most of the time. So the consent's got to be good. But then all of the privacy regulations that are out there now, especially if you're using generative AI to train the model, or if you have a service provider that's using it, because then there are all kinds of contractual requirements that have to be in place. You could be selling data as a result of that. And then there are a whole host of different state privacy requirements that come in, consent to monitor or record. I mean, just really a lot of things that folks need to consider before they start launching those types of things. This is definitely an area where an ounce of prevention is going to be worth a pound of cure, because this is something all of the regulators are all over. And,
yeah,
I think everybody has been hoping that the federal government would come along and pass a privacy bill that would preempt the states. I don't see it happening. It's just, it's nothing that we see any progress being made on, nor do I think that legislation could get passed, mostly because of our friends in California that'll never let it happen, because they want to make sure that they still have the CPPA, the California Privacy Protection Act. And as we have now state laws that are passing with private rights of action, terrifying, just absolutely
yeah.
terrifying. This
Yeah,
is,
I don't think people understand how much they're exposed to out here in terms from a risk standpoint. But again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier: good systems, good people.
yeah,
So as you
absolutely.
evaluate what is the right technology to deploy, how you want to do it, you got to have a systematized approach for that, and you got to have good people, good
Yeah.
counsel. Good people looking at it from a tech standpoint. I mean, I go as far as to say you've got to have good partners on the insurance side of it for your business, and really understand holistically what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and what some of the risks and some of the trade-offs are as you proceed down this, which is honestly, look, it's also it's exhilarating time as well, right?
For
Like the
sure.
possibilities, use cases that could be deployed are pretty amazing. But yeah, be
Yeah,
careful.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. Well, Chris, this has just been a wonderful afternoon to spend with you. Really enjoyed the conversation. Um, some reminiscing. It's when you've been in a bunker next to somebody, it's a relationship that always lasts. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad I was there at the beginning for you, because
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
it was the beginning of a lot of different things. So thank you so
yeah,
much
no,
for being with
we're
us
so
today.
grateful, Michelle, for you and your team, and just collectively on behalf of all of us, just thank you again so much for not only this conversation, but for the years of friendship and really wise counsel that you've given us. We're extremely grateful for you.
Likewise. All right, take care of yourself, Chris. Stay out of trouble, okay? I see the
I'll
football
try.
helmet back there. I bet it comes in handy every once in a while.
Yeah, NFL preseason tonight. The Raiders are here in Seattle. You can guess where I'll be.
So excited about football season. Don't get me started. All
That's
righty.
right.
Well, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.